Hello, everyone, and thanks for coming today. Please let me know if you can hear me well and you can see me well, so you can add more pluses in the chat box below there. Yes, okay, that's very good. So first of all, I wanted to say thank you for coming today on Saturday because you know that you might have more relaxing plans, but teachers are constantly learning, so that's why you're here. My name is Natalia Belousova, and I'm a teacher of English and also a teacher trainer based in Rostov, but I often work elsewhere in different places. And it's a great pleasure to talk on behalf of the Trent English Summit today. So, as Maria said, we're going to look at different ways of immersing students into English, although most of our students learn English in a non-English speaking environment. As you can see on the first slide, my presentation is called Beyond the Coursebook. So I'm not going to criticize Coursebook today because there are quite a lot of good ones, but we are going to have a look at how we could exploit Coursebook materials a little bit more to prepare our students for everyday life and for operating in real life situations. So the first thing I'd like to ask you about is to actively participate because we're going to discuss certain things and there will be a couple of interactive thinking slides in the presentation. So please type energetically in the chat box below if it's possible. Okay, it's really important. Do you agree? Tell me you agree. Yes, okay. Thanks very much. All right, so the first question I'd like to ask you is, what do you think this is on the slide? What is it? I'm going to wait a bit for your answers. Yes, it's a fish in a fishbowl, exactly. Yeah. Do you know why it's here? And what it means? Any thoughts? Yes, Natalia, thank you very much for this. So yeah. I always think that when students do things in the classroom, they're sort of in an artificial environment. You're absolutely right. And a course book is also like a fishbowl, I think, because it's more like an imitation of something that happens in real life rather than real life. And there are a lot of advantages of course books. So the first two advantages are that course books are familiar to the students and they feel safe. I think you've noticed that students get used to different types of tasks when they use course books, and they also get used to even to the layout of the pages. I think you've noticed that. So when students follow the same course, the same book, for a few years, they sort of know what's going to happen there. There's a reading section, there are some grammar tasks there. So types of tasks are more or less the same, and they get used to the format. That's why they stop really thinking about it, and very often coursebook tasks become under challenging and a little bit boring. And again, in this respect, they really differ from real life because there are a lot of unpredictable situations in real life. And then if you think about it, we don't really prepare our students for these unpredictable situations if we just follow course books using the types of tasks suggested by it. So if we summarize, the main disadvantages of coursebook tasks, I think, are that in spite of the fact that a coursebook makes our student feel comfortable, probably, coursebooks are often artificial, and again, they're quite restricted in terms of different ways in which students exploit the material suggested by Coursebooks. So as a result, the students might feel really comfortable in the classroom and show very good results and show good progress, but they might be really afraid of walking out of the classroom and crossing the threshold because in real life, because of that, they might feel, what might they feel? What do you think? What do you think? Yeah, frustrated. Or again, if we continue with this panic, exactly, if we continue with this metaphor, they might feel like a fish out of water. And they're panicking. They notice that they sound different. They notice that even though they're upper intermediate, they sometimes find it difficult to say things in seemingly easy, simple, everyday situations. So that's why here's a list of questions I think we should ask ourselves working with any course book. Okay, it doesn't matter which one, because again, course books nowadays offer good materials, but again, the types of tasks are more or less the same. Hello, Anna. It's okay. Just join us. So you can see a few questions on this slide that I asked myself when I wanted to change the situation. Okay, so I'm not going to read them. So the key things here are the ability to operate in real life situations naturally without feeling this threshold, having this threshold feeling like real life is different from what I was taught at school or in the classroom. Then it's also important that when we work with coursebook tasks, we tend not to think about real life skills that our students might need in life that are not only about language competence. So you can see it here. That's why the third question is like this. So can the English language be used to acquire other useful knowledge and skills? And also it's about the use of English outside the classroom. And again, it's like a separate reality, our classroom. Like we do things there, the moment we walk out, we stop speaking English or writing in English. I mean, of course, it depends on the students' motivation and everything. And there are lots of them now who watch series or films in English, chat with their friends, but definitely it's not everyone. So the objectives that I set when I tried to change the situations were the following. So get the learners out of the fishbowl, where you remember the fishbowl is the symbol of an artificial environment, or the rigidity of the course book, and then try to make tasks more meaningful, more related to real life. And again, here we should think about our learners as individuals, even though we have a group. So basically, the learners of different ages and with different backgrounds have a different real life. So because they need different things, so we always have to think about it. Then how to motivate the learners to use the language as a tool and acquire some more useful skills, and also make the use of English and different skills like speaking and writing part of their everyday routine. For me, it meant that I have to create a no pressure environment, because when the students are pressed, I mean, we can see it at schools, then they're not really motivated to do it. Then it's important to focus on the learner's needs. And again, notice where the apostrophe is. Again, even if we have a group of learners, we keep thinking about the learner's individual needs, because otherwise you can't cater for them all. Then another important thing is to negotiate things with learners, negotiate types of tasks, or maybe deadlines, because children and teenagers are extremely busy now. And again, if you just overload them with more tasks in their free time, it can be motivating. So it's good to talk things through and negotiate different things with them, but we'll see how a bit later. Devolve responsibility, which means that it's not only the teacher who decides how things are going to be done in the classroom, but the students are actively involved as well. Create a comfortable environment. It's important to base on what they know. So, what often happens at school is that the learners are sort of divided, strictly divided in weaker students and stronger students, which I think is unfair because they're so their personalities are so interesting, and if some of the learners are not that good at memorizing lexes, it doesn't mean that they're not talented or they're just weak learners, because there are other areas where they're really talented. And it's very, very important, I think, to allow other abilities or other skills of our learners to shine through in the English language classroom, and it might help them to feel more confident. So it's good to use the learner's expertise in other areas. And another important thing is to encourage peer support and feedback, because in real life, the learners don't really have the privilege of having a teacher next to them, and they very often ask someone they know for advice. It could be their classmates or some people they know, and so on. So it's very, very important to give each other support. We all need it. Okay, so now time for practice, and we're going to look at something that course books offer. So as I said, modern course books are fantastic, and they contain a lot of great resources. There are publishers like the National Geographic or Cambridge, and you can find authentic and authentic-like texts, both reading and listening materials, lots of videos, lots of supplementary materials. But again, in terms of exploiting these materials, I think course books also offer a lot of missed opportunities that we as teachers might notice and use them. Yeah? So we're going to do the following today. We're going to look at some learner profiles and look at some materials suggested by books and think how we could exploit them better to cater for the learner's needs. Yeah. So while thinking about these course book tasks, please feel free to accept this task as think, yes, that's a good idea. Modify if you don't like something, or just completely reject if you think that the task is rubbish. Sorry to say that. So your first pets is a group of learners. That's actually my group, but I thought it would be it would be good to use real learners. So here's a group of upper intermediate teenage students. You can see them here. They created this little photo for our group. And they don't have a specific aim. It's just general English. But I always think that there is no thing like general English, because it's always English for the individual students' specific purposes. So you can see the age, and when I say that this is a group of students who have seen it all, I mean that they've tried so many things, and they've done lots of theatre projects, and they're really curious, and they participate in lots of volunteering and so on and so forth. So basically they easily get bored, and as they've studied English for quite a long time, they're sort of tired of course books and something that usually happens there. It was, I think, a couple of years ago, we were following a very good book by Jeremy Hammer and Carol Lethaby, which is called Just Reading and Writing. So it's a published book. It was published by Marshall Cavendish Education. And this book, again, contained, and it does contain, quite a lot of useful, interesting materials, but sometimes the way they're exploited was disappointing. I'm going to show you a few pictures, the real photos, that you can find on one of the pages of this book. Okay, so look at these photos. Imagine that you found them in this book. and think what you would do if you found these pictures in the course book. So how would you work with them with this group of learners? Okay, and please share your ideas in the chat box below. So that's the first picture. So there were just pictures, no names or information about them. Okay, so just 4 photos. So that's the first picture on page 11. That's the second picture. Then picture C. And picture D. Okay, so in the actual book, they were all on the same page, just 4 pictures, A, B, C, and D, and there was a task. But I don't want you to look at the task now. I'd like you to think how you would use these pictures with the students. I'm going to wait a little bit for a few answers. I'll keep showing you the pictures. Think what you feel about these pictures. So what kind of pictures they are, you think? So picture A, B, C, and D. Yes, Marina says that they show people's feelings. I agree. So a possible thing is to describe them and tell what they have in common. Aha. Interesting what country they were taken in. Discuss some social issues. Good idea. Feelings, emotions. It's interesting that all of you are talking about emotions. To discuss and guess the approximate time. Very nice. This is Katya says that it would be nice to discuss the time or even create a story which might be behind the picture. Very nice. I mean, they do evoke a lot of feelings, don't they? Like if you look at them all, probably apart from this one, they show people's emotions. So you can really look at the faces and think what stories behind them. I agree. Natalia also suggests maybe talk about memories. So this is very good what you were saying. Like I think this could be a fantastic prediction task before you do something else with the pictures or before you find out something about them. I agree. I mean, there are definitely 4 amazing stories behind them. And I think the main asset, the main advantage of these pictures is that they're all real pictures reflecting important events in the history of different countries. And they were all taken by famous photographers. And now I'm going to show you the actual coursebook task, the only task that the book suggested. Okay, tell me what you think about it. So this is the way it looked on the page. So you see all the 4 pictures here. Here's the task, but I just retyped it so that you can see the task well. So this is the actual outline of the page, okay? So task 1. What do you think about this task? Notice that there is nothing else, like no other tasks on these pictures, just this one. kind of boring. Yeah, okay. Blinding. Lost therefore. Exactly. It's like, you know, when I looked at the task, I thought, look, you show 4 amazing pictures with a lot of history behind them on the page. And then you use only one of them. And then you don't do anything else about the rest of the pictures. They're just there for some weird reason. this is what I call lost opportunities. I agree. And you see, I mean, it's a good book, and the writer is fantastic. Yeah, Jeremy Harmon and so on. But it's just that sometimes you think that coursebook writers just don't think about the ways of exploiting their materials very well, and the tasks are quite standard. Yeah, look at the photo, or, match one of them with the text, and there is an amazing text. Yeah, so if you look here. There's an amazing text on the next page, which is called More Than a Moment. I mean, it's a very good text. It's very dense information-wise, and there are a lot of interesting facts about the social situation in the United States in the 50s, with the segregated education and everything. And picture A, yeah, so this picture is in the focus. And there are fantastic real-life pictures, very good lexes that you could exploit in the text and everything. But if you just look here, the pictures are not exploited at all. And I really like what you said. And when I think about ways of exploiting materials, even if it's a picture, then I always start thinking about different real-life skills that our students need, and they very often lack because these real life skills are not developed in the classroom, not only the English language classroom. So before talking about the ways in which we exploited the pictures, I'd like you to look at the skills that the Partnership for the 21st Century Skills identified as the most crucial skills people who live in the 21st century need in real life. I'm sure you've seen them, but we sort of rarely think about them designing coursebook tasks or just tasks to exploit text and everything. So here are the skills, and according to the 21st Century Initiative, they're the most important now, and these skills will be even more important in the future. So this initiative included 21 participants from different countries and from different US states. And the members of this initiative came from different areas. So they were the leading organizations in different areas, and you can see some of them on this slide. There's also a link, so if you follow this link, you can read a bit more about this initiative. And first they came up with 18, I think, crucial skills, but then they thought that it's a bit too much, and so they identified 4 that are absolutely important. So here they are. What are they? What's the blue one? What do you think? What's the blue one? What's the blue important skill? Communication is here. It's not blue, but it's there. Okay, communication is there, but it's the orange one. Well, speaking is part of communication, isn't it? It's like one way of communicating with people. Yeah, thinking, expressing ideas. Yeah. What else? How about the other 2? So we have something about thinking, speculating, and communication. How about the purple one and the green one? So what do you think? What are they? Teamwork. Very good. Collaboration. Absolutely. Because we do have to collaborate in most real life situations, at work, doing sports, and so on. Networking, something like that. Yeah. So we hardly ever work alone, and we hardly ever do things alone, but collaboration is also a skill. The green one is brainstorming. You're very close, Natalia. Yeah. So I'm going to show them to you. Yeah. So critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. Absolutely. Yeah. Generating ideas. And again, there is nothing extraordinary about these 4 skills because you sort of understand people need them, but the question is whether they're developed. So I'm going to show you the way we worked in these pictures, easy peasy, but you think which of these skills were developed, or at least we were thinking about developing these skills, okay? Which of the 4? So, so remember the pictures. Yeah, I'm just going to show you this page again. So when we started working on this unit, it was about making our lives memorable. So pictures was just one way of making our lives memorable. So the only thing I did, I gave my students these 4 pictures, just these 4 pictures without this. I sort of found them online. It's possible to find them online. They're very famous pictures, but you can just cut them out. It's also possible. And ask them to go home and to find as much information as possible about these pictures. So you can see that there are no names or descriptions on this page, just the pictures. And I say, Google, do whatever you like, but find the information about these pictures. And they all came back next time with the stories and the names of the photographers, because we all know that our students' digital literacy is much better than ours in many cases. But if you know that the students are not so tech savvy and they need some help, then there is a very, very easy tool which can help learners find out some information about famous pictures. So unfortunately I can't go online and show you how it works, but so if we just go to the Google website, and where you often look for some information, you can see that there are a few options here. The first is all, and then if you type in a description of something, then it'll just give you a few hits and you can read about some things you're interested in. But there is also images. So if you click here and go to images, then you don't really have to type in the description of the picture or anything, because there's this icon here. So if you click there, you can upload any image from your computer or telephone if it's there. So you see, so I uploaded the information about one of the pictures, and here you've got loads of hits about this picture, very often in English, because this picture was taken in the United States. And then the students can just browse and read different information about this picture and why it is one of the most influential pictures of the 20th century and so on. So, and find out that it was taken during the Great Depression in the United States, and this is a family of pea pickers and so on and so forth. So they can do it easily, but again, they can do it themselves, and I think it's a really meaningful type of homework that you can give them before they actually start doing the Coursebook tasks and before they start reading the text, because then the conversation is going to be much more meaningful. And I think that your idea of discussing what they can see in the pictures, so when they think they were taken, so like the period, the country, the emotions that they can see on people's faces, and maybe some guesses, wild or educated guesses, why these people feel like that. All these questions would be fantastic when you just give these pictures to them and discuss them before they go home and Google some information about them, because I think it's really motivating to try and find something out. And again, going back to the 4 skills that we've just identified, which of these skills do you think would get activated if you give a task like that? So first discuss in class, then go home, find as much as possible, use Google, which is available, come back, tell the story. So which of the skills you think? So we said creative thinking, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking. Critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity. So which of them? Again, I'm going to be waiting for some answers. Critical thinking, exactly. Because you look at the picture and you start analyzing it, you start noticing certain things about this picture, like why are they black and white, for example, or look at the clothes the people are wearing. some other things, communication. And also, communication, because, they all came with bits and pieces of information. And then as a group, we managed to find out basically everything, probably, that's possible to find out about these pictures. And collaboration, I agree, all the 4 skills. I mean, it's an easy task. I mean, you don't really have to prepare for it as a teacher, but it's such a useful task. All the 4 skills, and definitely they read some information in English at home, which means more exposure to the English language outside the classroom, and you also discuss their findings in the classroom in English. Collaboration, yes, because you know what happened with to my students in my situations. When I asked them how they looked for the information, one of the students said, "Look, I didn't know where to start, or how to do it, so I called my friend Anya, and she explained." So, this is also a real life skill. Like, if you don't know how to do it, ask your friend, and this is what happened, and they helped each other and supported each other. Okay, so this is just one thing, and look, it's not a complicated piece of material. Okay, they're just pictures. They're just good pictures. They're real pictures. We're going to look at some other ways of doing it, of exploiting coursebook tasks. So here's your new pet, right? I think it's important to look at student profiles because you always want to cater for their individual needs. Again, I'm going to repeat it again and again because it's important. So this is Dan, age 16, level intermediate, a bit lower. Again, general English, but he is thinking about taking the Unified State exam, the YGA exam, or whatever you call it, a bit later. And first of all, he doesn't like reading, okay? So it's not his thing. He finds it really boring, and he prefers to get information in a more visual way. Yeah, like watching series, watching some programs, listening to things. So reading is not his favorite thing to do. But he really needs to practice his reading soft skills because he's not really strong there. And again, it's always important to know something about your students' other abilities. So again, Dan is really tech savvy, okay? So if you have a problem with something computer related or internet related, ask Dan, okay? So I'm going to show you another piece of material from another very good book that we were following back then. Dan was not the only student in the group. There were 3 of them, but I'd like you to focus on Dan. So the book was Solutions Intermediate. I'm sure you know the book Solutions because it's often used with teenagers. And it's quite a good book. I mean, if you look at the way it's organized, it's quite logical. And again, I find it really convenient because it's easy to line up something that students do at school, following the approved course books, and some units and materials that the solutions book provides. There are some disadvantages, but I think we could say it's about any book we're using. So on page 9, it's pages 9 and 10, you can find a very interesting text in this book. Again, a fantastic text and a very interesting piece of information, which is called Hearing Colors. So even if you look at the title, it's already quite interesting. There is something to talk about here. And then, so the name of the text is Hearing Colors. And then here's the, I'm not going to show you the whole text because I think it's not important now, but you can see an excerpt from this text, and you can see the way the text is organized on the page because it always, tells us how we can use it. Yeah, so you can see like 3 paragraphs from this text. So have a quick read because I think it's important to see what the text is about. And there is also a picture of a man called Neil, and Neil is the main character. So basically, his life is described in the text, and it's important that Neil is a real person. Okay, so it's not an invented character, it's a real person. Okay, so could you please, again, look through the beginning of the text quickly, look at the materials suggested by the book, think about Neil, who's a real person, and again, suggest a couple of ways in which you would exploit these materials below in the chat box, okay? So I'm going to wait for your answers for a couple of minutes. Someone's typing. Yeah, sure. Yeah, before the text. Yeah, because very often pre-reading really helps to make reading much more interesting. Yeah, so pre-reading activities are nice. I mean, they don't have to be standard pre-reading activities like look at the picture, think what you think about Neil, read the text, yeah, and so on. But some pre-reading is very often good if it sort of connects this text and this page of the course book again with really post reading, while reading, any activities. Looking at the title and some pictures of Neil's works, if a student likes them or not, what they can see, who painted them, why, show a picture of Neil, maybe the title. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Suggest how the device works. Great, because the device looks really unusual. I agree. Critical thinking. Put yourself in his shoes. Imagine what the world looks like. It's a very good suggestion, Natalia. Like, put yourself in his shoes. The only thing I'm thinking about is that it might be a good idea to ask this question to the students after they've read the text, because when you just look at this picture, you don't want to give away too much information about his life before the students have an opportunity to read the text. But if you just look at the picture, then we can't really find out much about Neil's life. So I think this is a very good idea. Put yourself in his shoes, but probably after they've, read the details and, the way he lives and maybe more information about how he creates his paintings and pictures. But the idea is great. Yeah. Okay. Well, we have something. Keep typing your ideas. So I think there are a lot of advantages here because, again, as we said, the title is really interesting. Like here in colors, there's a sort of mismatch here. Yeah, and then it's interesting. It would be interesting to know. The title is definitely worth using because it would be interesting to know how your students imagine that. It's good that it's a real picture, and generally speaking, I always advise to find, maybe some more pictures on the internet. Yeah, watch a TED talk with Neil. Nice. Yeah. Revise senses. Aha. We'll talk a little bit about it because I think it's pretty much in line with something we did. Yeah. So if it's a real picture, then it's always good to, again, Google a little bit, to Google some information about Neil and what he does and his lifestyle now and how his life has changed. Maybe find more recent pictures and so on and so forth, because it's always interesting to read about real people. Yeah, so again, thank you for what you've suggested. Watch a TED talk with Neil. Good idea. Is it only me or the sound keeps breaking? Is the sound okay? Because seems to be okay. Can you say if the sound is okay now and if you can hear me well? Because Svetlana is having problems. Okay, Svetlana, so maybe there's something with the signal on your side, but I hope it gets better. Sometimes it isn't okay. Mm-hmm. All right, let me know. I can just speak a bit slower, probably. Yeah, okay, good. So I think it's all about the internet signal, in different locations it happens, but mine seems to be okay so far. Let's hope. All right. So once again, exploiting the title, exploiting Neil's picture, maybe reading about him, and so on and so forth. But I really like the idea that you could actually exploit your own senses and the way your senses work, because it's not really an area that we look at. Like, how often do you think about your own eyes, ears, the other parts of the body that can perform certain functions? We sort of take them for granted, but it would be interesting to maybe focus a little bit more on your own senses. I really, some people who know me know that I'm a fan of mindfulness now. I mean, not all of it as a trend, but the idea that we should concentrate more on different ways in which we do things, concentrate on one moment, concentrate on what you see and how you see it, and so on. So, what I decided to do with the students, and I think it was quite interesting, is this. I'm going to actually take you through the lesson procedure that we used with the students and explain why we decided to do these things. So there is a link here. I'm going to show you in a second what you can find there. So you know that there are numerous websites offering quite interesting quizzes and tests where we can check how good our eyes are, how well we can see things, how high our IQ is, and so on and so forth. And students, well, from my experience, find them quite interesting, quite engaging. So I found quite an interesting website. I'm gonna just switch to the slide to show you what you can find here because I can't use the link. So, sorry. So here it is. Yeah. So on this website, you can find a test which allows you to test your color vision. Yeah. So you can read a little text below here, and I think that not all the people realize that basically what they see might be completely different from what other people can see. And the way we see colors, again, might differ from the way other people see colors. And then there is an interesting text below. So if you check out this link, you can just scroll down and do the test. And it's very interesting that some people find out some surprising facts about their vision and the way their eyes work. And my suggestion for this lesson was to actually do this interactive test in class if there's an internet connection in your classroom, and we also have an interactive whiteboard. But if not, you can ask the students to do this test at home, before the lesson, before this reading lesson. And here you can see my objective, yeah? So discuss their findings and new facts, something they found out about their color vision, maybe compare their findings and see if their color vision is the same or different. This is already a real life element, and again, an opportunity for the students to discover something about themselves and also to communicate and so on and so forth. So this is actually, it wasn't a very time-consuming activity, so it took just 10 minutes, but I think it was much more meaningful and real-life related than a standard sort of lead-in where you say, okay, in pairs, discuss the following questions. Because again, if we go back, I'm going to go back to the 4 skills all the time. If you go back to those 4 real-life skills, so again, this means, some work online, which is again digital literacy, which students need in any area now. And again, the test is in English, which means more exposure, because to answer the questions that the text offers, you have to understand what's written there. So it means more reading and probably less restricted reading, because you just read like in real life. And then it's also about communication, because the students are supposed to discuss their findings in pairs and so on and compare, and for this they need some speaking strategies. So it's just a nice speaking moment again, and they have to report on their findings. So again, lots of useful skills involved. The next thing we did was actually quite standard. So we worked with the title. This is something you suggested, because this title just begs to work with it. It's really interesting. So there were some predictions, and then just reading, why not, and then detailed reading. So, and then they also did this test like match the headings with the paragraphs, because so if you remember the structure of this text, you see, so it's just the task that seems to be logical here. So we did standard but useful things with them. But then I also decided to add some more real life as the follow-on after reading this text. And this is where your ideas, like put yourself in his shoes and think how his life is different, I think beautifully come into play. So this is what I asked my students, so very close, like what problems does a person who is totally colorblind face in everyday life? And they were mingling and talking. And again, going back to the 4 skills, it is about critical thinking, isn't it? Like, you have to analyze the situation that Neil lives in and really, really think thoroughly what it implies in terms of everyday routines or maybe communication with other people and so on and so forth. And again, it implies sharing and speaking here. I also think that tasks like that, when you ask the students to really imagine themselves in someone's situation, are nice, because they also develop empathy, which is a rare thing nowadays. And, probably they just start thinking about little things they never think about, concentrating on their own life only. And there was another element, because when we discuss homework, I also always want to make sure that it's meaningful, okay? So we went back to another section of the website that I showed my students at the beginning of the lesson, and just showed them that there are more materials there about color vision. So I didn't ask the students to read something, like I didn't make them, remember, no pressure, but I just made them aware that this website contains lots of other interesting materials on this topic, and I just showed them where to find them. And then the homework was to write a reflective blog post on what they found out about the color vision, and they had to post it, and then also comment on their partners' blogs. We were writing reflective blogs because I think, again, from the point of view of real life, this is something which is widely spread. And I think this is a type of writing which students find quite interesting, and it's still quite fashionable to write your own blog. And again, it doesn't matter that it's not an essay, okay, or a piece of academic writing or something like that, because when they write a blog, they basically have to think about the structure of the writing, logic, coherence, the use of lexis, the use of grammar, and so on and so forth. So they keep working on all those important writing sub-skills that they need when they create other types of texts. So, although we're not really working on exam type tasks here, we're still developing their ability to write better, which they will need preparing for all sorts of exams and so on. And I want to stress the fact that when they write blogs, always make it part of the task to comment on each other's blogs, because, it's just, again, another useful skill. Yeah, we rarely do things in vacuum, and it's always a good idea to say what you think, to encourage, to agree, to disagree. That's why this is probably the only element of pressure here. I sort of make them comment on each other's blogs, at least one. There's a question here which I think is important. Do you check and correct their blogs? Yeah, I do. I've got access, but before we do any correction work on their language, there's always feedback on the content of the writing. Yeah, so we think whether the findings that the students posted or maybe described in their blogs are interesting, whether the structure is nice, whether the blogs were easy to follow, and so on and so forth. Maybe the manner was friendly, and so on. So first, as a group, with other students as well, we comment on the quality of writing. And I think that corrective feedback, when we comment on the use of lexis, grammar, and everything, is sort of my privilege more than other students' privilege in this situation. So we do the correction work in two different ways. So the first way is when, it requires more work on my side. So I send some things to work on to each student individually, because I often have their emails, or we have a VK chat, or we have a Facebook chat or something, which allows us to communicate on a regular basis. With some students who also use Padlet virtual walls and so on and so forth. So I either send their individual feedback, which means a bit more work. If you can't afford to spend so much work, correcting their writings and communicating with each of them on the individual basis, we do delayed correction in one of the following lessons. So what I do is I read through all the blogs, then I select a few samples of my learners' good language, because I think it's a very good idea to show off the learner's good language, some interesting sentences, good grammar, good lexis, good collocations, patterns, and everything. So I select a few examples of their good language, and also I select some errors. I mean, you can't work on all their 45 mistakes, okay? But I select a few errors which are, either typical of all the students, then which are Russianisms, because this is a thing which has to be focused on, because students often tend to just translate literally from Russian into English, and then very often their sentences don't make sense because of that. Or maybe this is something, some material that we've already covered, but I can see that there are still areas there, so we might focus a little bit on those little things. Yeah, or some things that might cause breakdowns in communications and so on. And then I just put these sentences as a list. They're usually mixed, good language, bad language, and the students work in group, and they have to to say which of the sentences are good, which of the sentences are not very good. If they think they're not very good, they try to identify why, try to paraphrase, and then we discuss all this. So this is basically the whole lesson after they've done their writing tasks, which is extremely useful, I think. It can be done in the form of, grammar casinos and things like that. Just use your students' language. Then there is another question, a technical question. Do you organize a special group in VK or elsewhere for these blogs? With these students, we use the Blogger platform. So there was my blog, and then on my blog, I posted the links to my students' individual blogs, and so we all could access all of them. Okay, if you're interested in blogging, you can just email me later on. I can explain how we did it. But we usually have something, and as you remember, I prefer to negotiate things with my students. So I usually ask them, look, we need a group or a chat. Where would you like to have it? They say VK, and then we create a VK chat. Some of them like Padlet, if you know what it is. It's like a virtual wall, and you can put all kinds of files there, all types of files there. So again, they're easily accessed, and it's also a convenient thing to use. So we just negotiate, because sometimes your students can give some advice, believe me, where it's easier to have a chat or a group. And then we discuss things there, post some materials, reflect on certain things, and so on and so forth. I find it really, really, really convenient, because you can access your students' time. And again, to remember, based on what they know, they sort of find this type of communication easy and comfortable. Anna asked to share any links about how to write a reflective. You can just email me if you're interested, and I'll share some other example of a reflective blog today. Okay. All right. So this is it. Again, with this task, we're not finishing. So again, it's just a standard reading text, which is a good reading text, interesting from the point of view of the content, and it also has some motivating things on the page, like a good title and a picture of a real guy. And again, see how easily you can exploit it, and you can do some real life tasks like go into the task, compare findings, and so on. And you can link so many different skills here. And again, it doesn't really require too much preparation, because, if you just find a good internet resource or something else your students can do at home, and give them the freedom of watching it, commenting on it, and so on. I really, really find it motivating. Okay, time to move on, and we're going to look at another way of... I've just noticed this question. Do they publish their text for public access or just for private use? Katya, this is another thing to negotiate, because if the students don't feel comfortable publishing their text for public access, I prefer not to do it, and then we just make this limited access for our group members only. So it means that I can access this post, and all the students of the group can access this post, but it's not for the public. But some students find it quite motivating to post something so that other people can read it. They want likes and so on. So it pretty much depends on how confident your students are as social network users, and so on. So this is something to talk about with a particular student or with a particular group of students. You negotiate that, and then you make this decision as a group, which means trust. They do appreciate it. Okay, so I know that the title of my presentation is Beyond the Coursebook, but of course we don't only use coursebook materials in our lessons, and sometimes we find some interesting reading materials on different websites. So that's why I'd like to talk about something you could do with a text found online. And we're going to look at news and newspaper websites like BBC, CNN, and other websites like that. Again, the advantage of these websites is that they publish articles, and articles generally are not the easiest type of reading. Yeah, just because it's well, there are a few factors. First, the headlines, and then these texts are quite dense, so there are a lot of facts there, and you sort of have to walk through them like through a dense forest. And uh, usually newspaper articles imply the use of lexis, which is not informal lexis, and so on and so forth. So the sentences are quite long. So these texts are not easy. That's why I really like using some authentic texts, even with lower levels like pre-intermediate, intermediate students, because again, articles can be different. You just need to browse and find something that's not over challenging for them. So I think that you all remember the tragedy that happened in Kemerovo a few months ago. Do you remember when there was a horrible fire and a lot of children died? So I do believe that it's important to talk about things like that in the classroom, no matter how heavy this stuff is, because again, this is part of our real life. And as long as we're talking today about preparing our students for real life in our English language classroom, I think it's important to discuss some subjects that are, difficult, where some people get emotional or they're not ready to analyze, and so on and so forth. So I found quite a good article that was published on the BBC site website. I think it was the next day after the tragedy. So you can see again the beginning of this text. And the headline of the article was Russian Kemerovo fire, shopping center exits were blocked. Because as you remember, it was one of the main reasons why, well, allegedly, at least according to what they said on TV and what they said in different articles, why people couldn't escape. So, and I quite like this article because it was completely not biased, and it gave, some facts about how many people were killed and so on. Thanks very much, Maria. Pity you are leaving now, but good luck. Have a lovely weekend. So you can see just the beginning of this article, just to get an idea, okay? What do you think, again, if you wanted to use an article, and I'm sure that you sometimes use reading text like that in your classrooms, again, how would you do that? Again, think about the type of text, yeah? Because we can't read articles like we read, I don't know, fiction, or in the same way we read interesting stories like the one about Neil that we just discussed. So think about the type of this text and how you would approach it in a lesson. And again, it would be great if you could type some ideas below in the chat box. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. Okay, I can see that someone's typing, so we're going to wait for another minute. Natalia is suggesting discussing the heading, see if the children know the news. Let's pre-teach some vocab first. I agree about the headline because again, our children don't live in vacuum, so it's always good to find out what they already know about the tragedy before reading the text. Agree. Again, it's using their knowledge and their expertise, and it's their chance to show off, a little bit and say, yes, I've read about this, and this is what I know. And also another speaking moment, so an opportunity to share and speak English and so on. Speaking about pre-teaching vocab, Natalia is asking where we should do it. It's always a dilemma because, in real life we don't really pre-teach vocab, but at the same time, I don't think it's bad to pre-teach 2 or 3 words, maybe 4, but not too many, because you're killing the skill, if you're pre-teaching a lot of words. But to pre-teach 3 or 4 words, which are absolutely crucial for the understanding of the article. So it's okay to sort of remove these obstacles, just think how many. Use scanning for certain facts or recent findings. Yeah, why not? The lexical approach. Sounds like another long session, but I'll tell you, I like the lexical approach, and I sort of use it a lot, not all of it, but, some ideas that this approach implies, and we'll discuss how you could use it here, for example, working on this article, no problem. I know Hudela's ideas, and I do respect Hudela, but I sort of trust in post-teaching collocations and patterns more. Because again, I think they're 2 different things, like working on lexis and working on the actual skill when there's an article, like there's a newspaper lying there and you open it, and unfortunately, nobody's going to pre-teach you the lexis, but you sort of need to figure out as much information as possible. And, our students tend to notice the words they don't know in the text and completely ignore the words that they know that are familiar in the text. And I think that for Russian students, at least, it's nice to sort of shift the focus and say, don't think about the words you don't know. Notice how many words you know in this text and try to figure out as much as possible, and then work on the lexis more from the article. Yeah, so it's good to work on the lexis. It's just a constant dilemma on when you want to do it, depending on your aims. So, again, your ideas, there are a couple of ideas in the chat box are fine. It depends on the student's level as well, but just going back to pre-teaching, see what I think. If you pre-teach all the words that they don't know in the text, they stop reading for information. They just start reading these words, and you're not really developing their ability to figure out the meaning of the word in the context. I think that's why pre-teaching too many words or collocations is more about teaching lexis on the basis of the text, text-based. There's a text-based approach rather than working on the skill itself. So there is another suggestion here. This is where there is a liberty is what they. Yeah, this is a very good idea, Natalia. I think compare the information which is given in the article with something you've heard on the Russian mass media. Great, because it's all about critical thinking and being able to compare things, a very useful life skill. Natalia Belousova is asking, can we discuss what they would do in case of fire in a supermarket? Yes, that's a great idea, I think. Probably after reading the article, as a way to respond to the text. It's always good to respond to what you've read in the classroom, because this is what happens in real life. You read an article and then you've got some feelings after reading it you want to share. And we tend to think, what we would do in this situation or what we should do. So it's also a very good idea. That's right, yeah. Okay, so again, I'm going to show you how we approach this text. Again, it's not the only way of doing it, but I thought it was sort of a meaningful way of approaching a reading text of this type. So, so Victoria is also, also a good idea after reading an article. So I think that one of the problems that our students encounter in the classroom doing different things, okay, in speaking tasks or doing some writing tasks and so on, is the lack of ideas. So it's difficult to generate some ideas on the topic, and I think that it's reading a text like that, which is obviously real life related, is a good opportunity to sort of help them generate ideas. But to help the students generate ideas, the students have to understand that this situation is not abstract. It's not something that can never happen in their life, that it can easily happen in real life. That's why, again, I very often use mindfulness moments in the classroom. So, for example, this is my group, and they're working on this text. So before they started reading this text, and after we have discussed something that they've heard on mass media, maybe read somewhere on the websites about this tragedy, I asked them to close their eyes for a minute and imagine themselves at the site of the tragedy. And I asked them to really, really focus on this moment and think what they can see, hear, smell, feel, and we had a silent moment in the class, really for minutes or even longer. After that, I asked them not to speak because, when you have some images in your head and you start speaking, they tend to go away. And silently just write down some things they sort of mentally saw, some things they imagined in the form of a mind map. So this is what the students, so here they're just writing down some of their, ideas, something they had, something they saw. And this is an example of, this is what one student created. So you can see camera and some noises here, like phones ringing. I'm not sure you can read the handwriting, so I'll just read a couple of things. People crying and screaming, signals of ambulance, firefighter cars. This is interesting. Inescapability, crowds, people seeking for help, smells of fire, and so on. So for the student, it's an opportunity to really imagine themselves living through this moment, which makes it much easier to generate ideas on the topic, no matter what you're going to do after that. For the teacher, it's a fantastic diagnostic moment because, I can see some words on the topic. So, I can see if they know the names, like if they know the word fire engine or, firefighter cars. So they are talking about fire engines, signals of ambulance. I think, so the word signal is not really the exact word. Yeah. So in terms of pre-teaching, I can first look at something that they put on their mind maps and then decide which words to pre-teach or maybe not to pre-teach, because I can see that they sort of know some vocab on the topic, which is enough to understand the text, So again, there might be a lot of useful vocab in the text, but I wouldn't do it before reading. I do it after reading. So in the way of, it's more like post-teaching vocab. So this is another example. So you see, if you compare, well, this student is not that detailed. It's like shopping mall, fear, children death, terrible smell of the fire, and shocked parents, and so on. So I'm going to answer Katya's question a bit later, if it's okay, all right? Then we put the students' ideas on the whiteboard. So this is my whiteboard, and these are basically what they said. But I also tried to reformulate a little bit. Like it's good to reformulate on the way, because these are the students' ideas, so they know exactly what they mean. You just help them word their ideas a little bit. Like together, we remembered the word irresponsible. We talked about bribing. We remembered the word negligence, for example, which is a good piece of vocab. And lots of things came out of this silent minute, actually. And then speaking about, again, the ability to operate individually in real life situations, can you tell me why we read articles like that in newspapers, on different websites, in real life? Like, why do we read articles? What's our purpose? Could you type it in the chat? Why do you read articles about different events? Seems obvious, but still. Yeah, find certain information, exactly. Yeah, only teachers read articles for authentic language. And people go crazy about languages. But I mean, just any person would read an article on the website or somewhere else because we want some information, yeah? And we sort of want to find answers to some questions that we have in our head, okay? So useful vocab, real language. Teachers, you are nerdy, okay? Think about students. They might not read articles for the sake of finding some pieces of authentic language, but this is a good purpose. I mean, any person, even a person who is not studying languages, would read articles for the sake of finding some answers to the questions they have, like how many people died, why it happened, what were the reasons. I don't know, I want to find out. That's why another thing you could do with your students to prepare them again for the sort of reading is not provide them with the questions they have to answer after reading the articles, like comprehension questions and so on. But you could ask the students to come up with, let's say, 5 questions to find answers to in this article. So there could be any questions like, how many people died, again, were killed, and what did the authorities do to prevent the tragedy, and because the advantage of this type of text is that we can predict the content. I mean, any article about any tragedy would contain some facts about the number of deaths, possible reasons, the situations, the reaction, and so on and so forth. That's why for the students, it's sort of quite easy to come up with some questions. So if you have a group, because I have a group, I ask the students to come up with 5 each. So they sort of write down their questions alone first. But then they talk, again, this communication moment, they compare their questions, and come up with a short list of questions. So it means that they have to eliminate identical questions or similar questions and come up with a good short list of questions as a group, And this is it. So if you look here, on the right side of the whiteboard, you can see the questions that my students came up with. So again, they were dictating their questions to me, and I was reformulating a little bit on the way. Or another way of doing it is write down their questions the way they formulated them, and then do some delayed correction. Like, look at the questions now, they're nice questions, meaningful, well done, but find the ones that are not very good. And again, as a group, at this stage, even before reading the text, they might correct, a few inaccuracies and everything. So you see that the questions are really meaningful, like what caused the fire? What is the exact number of people killed in the fire? What is the reaction of the Russians? And then they asked me to underline this part. Why did so many people die? Because they couldn't believe that the number of people, and so on. Then the next stage was to read the text. So this was the task. and say which of the questions are answered in the article. So notice I didn't ask the students to answer the answer the question straight away, but just to find out which of their questions are answered and where. So what they did was they looked through the text and just put the number of the question next to the sentence or next to the paragraph where they thought this question was answered. And so they sort of mapped out the text like that. And during the feedback stage, we just discussed which questions are answered, making sure that everybody sort of had the same answers. And we also just crossed the questions that were not answered in the article, because of course there were a few questions like that. The next stage was quite standard, sort of. So they read the article again and tried to find as much information as possible on the questions that were answered. And then, after discussing the article and sort of responding a little bit to it, the homework that I asked my students to do was again Google, and try to find as much information as possible on the questions that they asked. They were their questions, so they wanted to know the answers. Yeah. But the questions that were not answered in the article, and they sort of browsed different internet sources. And then next time when they came back, at the beginning of the lesson, they sort of told each other what information they found, if any, on the questions that they asked in the previous lesson. So again, this is the procedure. So I just put everything we've just discussed together. Just have a look for a few seconds. Tell me if you have questions or if something is not clear, you can always type in the chat. So while you're looking through it, I'll just summarize the advantages of a procedure like that. And again, it's important that you can use it with any course book text which is of this type, where you can sort of predict the content and what might be there, not fiction, because it's impossible to ask questions if you have a piece of fiction. But if it's an article, it's always good. So first of all, mindfulness moments like that, where you close your eyes, when you stay silent for a couple of moments and sort of imagine the situation, are good because they make the whole thing alive, and it really, really helps idea generation. And then when they discuss this, it also generates quite a lot of good lexis, okay? And then it's always nice to give the students a chance to basically prepare a list of questions, because these questions then come from them, and it means that they're more motivated to read because they want to find out the answers. And also, it's nice when it's done in collaboration with other students, going back to the skills we discussed, the 4 C's. And again, it might create opportunities for nice, meaningful homework, not just a gap fill or learn the words, but really browse, try to find out more information, and so on. Going back to your questions, I think it's okay to discuss heavy topics like that, because sometimes inconvenient topics, because this is what happens in real life. I mean, you can't really create a safe environment in the classroom just avoiding some topics because they, walk out of your classroom and this is something that surrounds them. But I think it's a nice opportunity to discuss touchy subjects in a comfortable environment with the peers they trust, with a teacher who can sort of help to, maybe guide their discussion in a healthy way. That's why I think it's fine. It's okay to be able to respond to things like that. And as for the lexical approach, what I always do personally with any text my students read or listen to. So after they've listened to a text, I work with the script, and after they've read the text, I ask the students to underline a few collocations a few collocations they personally like in the text and they find interesting. And again, the reasons why your students might like collocations or phrases can be completely different. So maybe it's just something that looks cool, or something that was unknown, or something they would like to use in their speech, and so on. And then they underline these collocations and we put them on cards, and then we do some Lexis work later on, working with their cards, some standard things like use them in your own context or prepare a presentation on the topic, use some of these collocations and patterns and so on and so forth. But we look at chunks, so we rarely look at individual words in the text. So here I absolutely agree with Hugh that it's important to look at lexical chunks and also grammatical patterns, and that a word is usually associated with a certain pattern. Yeah, that's why it's sort of good when they take out some ready-made chunks from the text. And this is definitely something you're not going to find in course books or dictionaries. So it's very, very good to exploit the text for good lexis and patterns. So I think we always do it with any text, if it's a good text, if it's an authentic text, or if it's an authentic like text, Yes, I can suggest some books on mindfulness, Natalia, but if you email me, okay? So if you've got some, a specific interest, if you want something on mindfulness or something we discuss, just email me later on. You will see my email address, and I'll send you some materials I have, or we can discuss things and so on. All right, so we have a few more minutes, so I'm going to show you one more thing. Some of you asked about reflection blogs, and again, here we're going to talk about YGE. Okay, so again, when people prepare students for this exam, they use all sorts of materials with tests, with sample tasks, some useful vocab tasks, and so on. And basically, they're quite good materials now if you make them, but I always feel that it's not enough because the students don't really have a chance to reflect on their preparation process. And then the students often don't have a chance to really develop knowledge and skills. So it's more like they keep developing exam strategies, which is quite restricted. But I always wanted to give the students a chance to do, something more meaningful than just exam preparation, without distracting them too much. So, and with my students 2 years ago, we created a YGE blog. It's called YGE Source Blog. So I created it, and I decided that here I'm gonna give my students extra tasks, some sort of homework, and it's gonna be one task a week. So again, unfortunately, I can't go there, so it's all a little bit small, but if you can see here, this is the description of the blog, and here I just posted tasks for the students so they could just click and see what they have to do during this week. And then I also included some useful resources for my students here. So they were mostly different online dictionaries, English dictionaries and collocation dictionaries. And then I even posted a Verbitskaya's video there because she explained something about the format. And I also posted some tips. So for example, how you can learn vocabulary and how to work in grammar and so on and so forth. So I'm going to show you some of the tasks I asked my students to do. So the first task they had to do during the first week was basically to create their own learner blog. Yeah, and this is the task. After reading the tutorial, how to start a free blog at blogger.com, create your individual blog at blogger.com, give it a name and an example, yeah? Sending the link to our group chat in VK by Wednesday, the 30th of November, yeah? So Their first task was actually to create their own blog, and I just gave them the tutorial, send them a link. So to create their own blog, they had to read the tutorial in English, understand what it means, and do what it said in terms of real life skills. And if you look at the way I formulated the objective to the students, I really couldn't help them step by step here. So they had to read this task and do what it said. That's why if you give the students individual tasks like that, something that you want them to do outside the classroom, just make sure that your objective and the task is formulated very, very, specifically and with a lot of detail. So when I formulate tasks for my students, it's just a little life hack. I use the model of which is called, let me show it to you. It's called the ABCD objective. I don't know if you've heard about ABCD objectives, but I'll show you the slide quickly. So there's a system, and if you want to read about ABCD objectives, again, you can follow the link below on the slide. So ABCD means that A is the audience, who is going to do the task. B is behavior, so what the learner will do, basically. C is condition. It's like how, maybe when, and so on. And degree is about speed, accuracy, and quality. So you can include a rubric, for example, showing how they have to do the task, and also the deadline and everything. So if we go back to this task, you can see, so after reading the tutorial, so that's how, yeah? Create was clear that they're going to do it. Create your individual blog, it's what. Give it a name, what. And then again, how. Sending the link, when, by Wednesday, yeah? So, and then they created their own blog and sent me the link, and I posted the links to their individual blogs here. You can see them on this slide. Learn a blog role, yeah? So, yeah, so these are the links to their individual blogs. Then the next task, for example, was to find something out about their learner type. I know that it's not fashionable to talk about learner types because we're all mixed, yeah? So there are no visual learners, just visual, just kinesthetic. But it's good to know actually something about your inclinations and maybe, to do multiple intelligence tests and so on. So, and they, again, did a test online in English, found out something about their learner types, and their task was to identify their learner type and areas they're good at, and reflect on how it might affect their preparation for the exam, again, in their learner blog. So in their learner blog, they had to write something like, I found out that I'm predominantly visual, so I think that to work on the vocab for the exam, I want to create, colorful cards or maybe accompany the words with drawings and so on. So they sort of have to create their own strategy of preparation for the exam at home based on what learner types they are. Yeah, this is what they did. Another task, they're just examples for week 2, was the lexical monster task. And I used this website, Zoonal, sorry, I think you can't say L very well, .com. Here you can just create different quizzes for learners in different topics. And so they had to do the quiz, do the vocab tasks, look at some useful resources again that they can find online. And again, reflect on, so read a number of articles about different effective techniques of memorizing vocabulary, choose the ones that are good for them personally, and come up with their own vocabulary learning strategies, reflecting on it in one of their blogs. And again, they had to comment on each other. So this is basically the idea, yeah? So apart from doing different published, going through published materials on exam preparation, they were also doing one task a week at home, which was more like a real life task. And They had to create their own blog, which is a life skill, to write a blog, which is a life skill. It meant a lot of reading and trying and analyzing, which is about critical thinking. And also it meant more writing, which I wanted to make them do as a teacher. Yeah. And you can see an example of the first blog of one of the girls who were preparing for YEGE. So again, you see that it's her text, so there's something to work on here language-wise and so on. So just have a look. And you know what I noticed? The writing in their blogs was I mean, genuinely much more accurate than other types of writings because of, other types of texts, because they sort of talked about something they wanted to talk about. It was quite genuine and so on. And they got some support from their peers in the comments, which is important, I think, when students are preparing for exams. They want support. Yeah. Well, this is basically it. So I think I've showed you something that I had time to show. And just to summarize, I think that it doesn't matter which book you follow, and whether you're just teaching a general English class or you're preparing students for exams, you can always find ways of exploiting the tasks and adding some real life skills, and just making the whole process much more useful, meaningful, and interesting for your students. So I think I finished. I think we have 2 minutes for maybe more questions, but we've discussed certain things on the way. Still, if you want to ask something, you can do it now in the chat. Again, if you want to find out more about mindfulness or blogging, or maybe the ways in which we can exploit tasks, or even maybe send your ideas and show how you exploited tasks, I would be really happy to communicate, and you can contact me here. Okay, so use my email address here, and I promised to for listening, and I hope you can do some things with your students as well. Okay? Yeah. All right, so no more questions, but we've discussed a lot of things. So thank you for participating actively and for thinking on the way and discussing the tasks and everything. You were a fantastic audience. I just feel sorry I couldn't see your faces because I really like offline formats more. Anyway, thank you very much. Email me, and I just hope to see you somewhere else. And have a lovely day. Have a lovely afternoon today. Bye-bye.